Ryan Cole had spent 15 years building a reputation as the toughest instructor in Westbrook Martial Arts Academy, a dojo just outside Denver where arrogance was often mistaken for discipline. And on that rainy Thursday night, as his body hit the mat in front of 20 stunned students, he realized too late that he had mocked the wrong woman. The sharp sound echoed through the dojo like a slammed car door. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Ryan stared at the ceiling lights above him, confused, humiliated, struggling to understand how the quiet woman in the gray hoodie had taken complete control of the room in less than 10 seconds. A teenage student near the back lowered his phone slowly. Who is she?" he whispered. The room stayed frozen. Then the story rewound 30 minutes earlier. Rain tapped softly against the wide front windows of Westbrook Martial Arts Academy as students stretched across the polished floor mats under bright fluorescent lights. The air smelled faintly of sweat, disinfectant spray, and old leather training pads. Ryan stood near the center of the dojo with his arms crossed over his black GI, watching his senior students spar while music thumped quietly through the overhead speakers. At 43, Ryan carried himself like a man who enjoyed being feared. Every movement was deliberate, every command sharp. His black belt, embroidered with gold stitching, hung perfectly at his waist like a badge of authority. Again, he barked as two students reset their stance. "You hesitate out there. Somebody embarrasses you." Several students nodded nervously. Near the front desk, Derek Shaw leaned against the counter sipping from a protein shake, grinning as he watched newer students struggle through drills. Derek was Ryan's favorite student for one simple reason. He enjoyed humiliating people almost as much as Ryan did. The front door suddenly opened with a soft creak, letting in a gust of cold evening air. A woman stepped inside quietly, rainwater dripping from the sleeves of her faded gray hoodie. She looked completely out of place among the aggressive energy of the dojo. Late 30s maybe. Blonde hair tied loosely back. No makeup. No jewelry except for a plain silver ring on one finger. A worn duffel bag rested against her shoulder. She paused near the entrance, scanning the room calmly while conversations around her slowly faded. Derek glanced over first. His smirk appeared instantly. "Well," he muttered loudly enough for nearby students to hear. "Looks like yoga class got lost." A few people chuckled. The woman ignored him completely and walked toward the front desk with measured, almost unnaturally calm movements. Ryan watched her carefully now. Something about her composure irritated him immediately. Most beginners entered the dojo nervous, intimidated. This woman looked tired, quiet, but not intimidated. "Can we help you?" Ryan asked, his voice carrying across the room. The woman set her duffel bag gently beside the wall. "I called earlier about joining classes," she said softly. Her voice barely rose above the sound of rain outside. "Name's Clare Bennett." Derek looked her up and down with obvious amusement. "You sure this is the right place?" he asked. "Our cardio kickboxing studio is 3 blocks east." More laughter rippled through the dojo. Claire simply nodded once, unaffected. "I'm in the right place." Ryan exchanged a glance with Derek, already sensing entertainment for the evening. What none of them understood yet was that Clare Bennett had spent the last 12 years trying to bury a past that once made her one of the most feared fighters in professional competition circles across the country. And before the night was over, Westbrook Martial Arts Academy was about to discover exactly why some people stay quiet for a reason. The rain outside intensified, streaking the dojo windows while Ryan slowly approached Claire with the measured confidence of a man who had never truly been challenged inside his own building. Around them, students resumed stretching and light drills, but the atmosphere had shifted. Curiosity spread quietly through the room. New students glanced toward Claire between warm-ups while senior belts exchanged amused looks, already treating her like the night's entertainment. Claire stood near the bench by the wall, calmly removing her damp hoodie and folding it neatly beside her duffel bag. Underneath, she wore a plain dark athletic shirt with no logos, no flashy branding, nothing that suggested experience or status. But when she rolled up the sleeves slightly, an older student named Marcus narrowed his eyes. Thin, faded scars crossed her forearms near the wrists. Not fresh injuries, old training marks, the kind earned through years of repetition and impact. Marcus looked away uneasily. Ryan noticed none of it. "So," he said, clasping his hands behind his back, "what experience do you have exactly?" Claire zipped her bag slowly before answering. A little karate. Some mixed training years ago. Derek laughed immediately from across the room. That usually means YouTube videos and one free trial class. Several students chuckled again. Claire did not react. Ryan circled slightly as if inspecting her. You understand this is not some suburban cardio program, right? He asked. We train seriously here. That is why I came, Claire answered softly. Her calmness irritated Derek more by the second. Confident people usually argued back. Nervous people apologized. Claire did neither. She simply stood there with the same unreadable expression, almost detached from the tension building around her. A younger female student named Emily watched quietly from the stretching area. Something about the way the instructors kept targeting Claire made her uncomfortable. Ryan finally nodded toward the mat. Fine. Join warm-ups. Derek smirked. This should be good. The class began with conditioning drills. Push-ups. Footwork patterns. Movement repetitions across the floor. Ryan expected Claire to struggle quickly. Most newcomers over 30 did. Instead, she moved steadily through every exercise without complaint or visible strain. No dramatic effort. No showing off. Just controlled movement. Derek noticed it too. Not bad for a beginner, he muttered sarcastically while wiping sweat from his forehead. Claire said nothing. During reaction drills, students paired up to practice defensive movements. Ryan deliberately assigned Derek to Claire. The senior black belt cracked his neck slightly before stepping onto the mat opposite her. Try to. Keep up, he said with a grin. Several students drifted closer now, sensing entertainment. Derek began slowly. Throwing light controlled combinations meant more to embarrass than challenge. Claire blocked each movement with minimal effort, barely shifting her feet. Her reactions were subtle, efficient, almost mechanical. Derek increased speed slightly. Claire adjusted instantly. Ryan's expression hardened just a little. Again, he ordered. Derek stepped in faster this time, adding a spinning movement designed to impress the class. Claire leaned half an inch to the side, and the strike missed cleanly through empty air. A few students blinked in surprise. Derek stopped smiling. For the first time that evening, Claire lifted her eyes fully toward him. Calm blue eyes. Steady. Focused. Empty of ego. Empty of fear. Marcus felt a chill crawl slowly up his spine. He had seen eyes like that once before at a national tournament in Las Vegas almost 12 years earlier. Back then, commentators had described one fighter the exact same way. Quiet. Emotionless. Impossible to read. Ryan crossed his arms tighter as the room gradually fell silent again. Because somewhere deep beneath his growing irritation, instinct had started whispering something dangerous. Claire Bennett was not struggling to keep up. She was holding back. The tension inside Westbrook Martial Arts Academy thickened like pressure before a thunderstorm. Students no longer focused on drills. Their attention kept drifting toward Claire and Derek at the center mat. Derek rolled his shoulders with growing irritation while Claire stood quietly across from him, hands relaxed at her sides, breathing calm and steady as if the entire room had disappeared around her. Ryan noticed it too. Experienced fighters usually carried nervous energy before sparring. Claire carried none, and somehow that unsettled him more than confidence ever could. Do not just stand there, Derek snapped, forcing a laugh toward the watching students. At least pretend you know what you are doing. Claire tilted her head slightly. I thought this was just light practice. A few students exchanged glances. Derek's smile tightened. He stepped forward again, this time adding faster combinations meant to pressure her backward across the mat. But Claire moved with almost unsettling efficiency. One small pivot, one controlled step, one slight shift of her shoulders. Every motion missed her by inches. No panic, no wasted energy. She was not reacting late. She was reading him before he moved. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. 12 years ago, in a crowded arena in Las Vegas, he had watched a female fighter dismantle national champions using the exact same style. Calm observation first. Minimal movement. Complete control of distance. He stared harder now at Claire's face, trying to pull a memory from somewhere deep in the back of his mind. Meanwhile, Derek's frustration grew more visible with every exchange. The room was no longer laughing. That bothered him most. You are getting lucky, he muttered under his breath. Claire stepped back politely. Maybe we should stop. Derek scoffed loudly. Why? You scared now. Ryan folded his arms tighter. Keep going, he ordered. Claire glanced toward him briefly. There was no anger in her eyes, only restraint. I came here to train, she said quietly, not to embarrass anyone. Several students looked at each other after hearing that. Even Emily stopped stretching completely now, watching with growing curiosity. Derek took Claire's calmness as weakness. That was his mistake. Embarrass us? He laughed sharply. Lady, you have not done anything. He gestured dramatically toward the center of the mat. Tell you what, let us see how long you last with real pressure. The crowd widened into a loose circle instinctively. Phones slowly appeared again. Ryan did not stop it. In truth, part of him wanted this spectacle. Westbrook Martial Arts Academy thrived on dominance. Humiliation was entertainment there. Claire stepped into position without protest. The fluorescent lights reflected softly across the polished floor while rain continued tapping against the windows outside. The entire dojo grew strangely quiet. Derek rushed forward again with far more aggression now, expecting Claire to finally break under pressure. Instead, something changed. Claire's posture lowered. Slightly. Her feet settled naturally into place. Her expression emptied completely. Marcus suddenly went pale. He remembered now. Not from television. Not from magazines. From an underground invitational tournament in Nevada years ago where a woman named Clare Bennett had become infamous for defeating opponents twice her size without ever raising her voice or showing emotion. Most people believed she disappeared after a controversial final match ended her career overnight. Marcus swallowed hard as realization crashed into him. Oh no, he whispered under his breath. Ryan heard him faintly. What? Marcus looked toward the instructor, eyes wide with disbelief. I think you have no idea who that woman is. But by then, it was already too late for the atmosphere inside the dojo to return to normal. Because for the first time all evening, Clare Bennett stopped looking like a tired middle-aged beginner. She looked like someone trying very hard not to become dangerous. Ryan stared at Marcus with visible annoyance. What are you talking about? He asked quietly. Marcus hesitated, still watching Clare with growing disbelief. The older man had spent decades around competitive martial arts circuits, and instincts like his did not trigger without reason. I think she fought professionally years ago, he said carefully. Not local tournaments. Real competition. Derek overheard the comment and burst into laughter. Her, he said loudly enough for the class to hear. Come on, Marcus. She looks like she works at a bookstore. A few nervous laughs followed, but weaker this time. Claire remained perfectly still near the center of the mat, while students shifted uneasily around her. The atmosphere no longer felt playful. It felt uncertain. Ryan stepped forward again, determined to regain control of the room. Enough talking, he said sharply. If she has experience, good. Then she can handle pressure. Claire looked toward him calmly. I did not come here for this. Ryan smirked slightly. Funny, because you seem pretty comfortable out there. Claire exhaled slowly through her nose, almost tired. Comfort and conflict are not the same thing. Derek rolled his eyes. Dramatically. Listen to that fortune cookie wisdom. More students had stopped training entirely now. Even those across the dojo drifted closer, pretending to stretch while quietly watching. Emily noticed something strange about Claire's breathing. It never changed. Most people became tense under pressure. Their shoulders tightened. Their movements rushed. Claire looked exactly the same as when she walked through the door. Calm, balanced, controlled. Ryan pointed toward the center line on the mat. One round, he announced. Light contact only. Derek grinned immediately, eager to reclaim his pride in front of the class. Do not worry, he told Claire mockingly. I will go easy on you. Claire lowered her eyes briefly, and for the first time all evening, a faint sadness crossed her face. Not fear. Sadness. As though she had heard those exact words many times before. Rain thundered harder against the windows while fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The dojo fell completely silent as Derek stepped closer into position. Ryan folded his arms confidently near the wall, convinced the moment would end exactly as he intended. Public embarrassment. Another lesson about hierarchy. Another reminder of who controlled the room. But Marcus no longer looked confident. He looked worried. His memory sharpened suddenly with brutal clarity. Las Vegas. 12 years earlier. A private invitational event streamed online before underground fight promotions became mainstream entertainment. Clare Bennett had entered quietly then too. No trash talk. No dramatic entrances. Just silence. And one by one, experienced fighters walked into matches against her with smiles, and left looking shaken. She became famous not because she was cruel, but because she never seemed emotional while competing. Analysts used to say watching Clare fight felt like watching someone solve a math problem. Efficient, precise, unavoidable. Then one night, after a controversial incident during a championship event, she disappeared completely from public competition. No interviews, no statements, nothing. Marcus suddenly understood why. Clare was not hiding weakness. She was hiding capability. Derek bounced lightly on his feet, smirking toward nearby students. "Somebody record this," he joked. Phones lifted immediately. Clare noticed them and looked away quietly. "Please do not," she said softly. Derek laughed. "Why?" "Worried this will end up online." Clare's expression hardened almost invisibly. "No," she replied. "I am worried about what happens if people keep pushing." The room went still after that sentence. Not because she raised her voice. She never did. It was the way she said it. Calm. Honest. Almost like a warning given out of courtesy. Ryan scoffed loudly, refusing to feel intimidated inside his own dojo. "Enough drama," he snapped. "Start." Derek stepped forward instantly with a confident burst of movement meant to overwhelm her fast. But before anyone fully understood what happened, Clare shifted once to the side with effortless timing, and Derek stumbled awkwardly past her balance point entirely on his own momentum. Gasps spread across the dojo. Clare did not attack. She did not celebrate. She simply reset her stance quietly and said four words that suddenly made the entire room uneasy. "We can still stop this." The silence inside the dojo became almost uncomfortable after Clare spoke those four quiet words. Even Derek hesitated for half a second, caught off guard by the strange certainty in her voice. Then embarrassment pushed his ego forward again. Several students were watching now. Phones were recording. And Derek Shaw had built his reputation on never backing down in front of an audience. "You think you are intimidating me?" he scoffed loudly. Clare lowered her hand slightly. "No," she answered. "I am trying to prevent you from embarrassing yourself." A few students exchanged stunned looks. Ryan's jaw tightened instantly. Nobody talked to his senior students that way inside his dojo. Especially not a quiet stranger in a faded gray shirt. Derek laughed again, but the sound felt forced this time. "Okay," he muttered. "I am done being nice." He moved forward sharply again, faster than before, trying to pressure Clare backward across the mat with aggressive combinations designed more for intimidation than control. But Clare flowed around every movement with calm precision. One pivot, one step, one slight turn of her shoulders. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. And somehow Derek could not touch her cleanly once. The watching students slowly stopped reacting altogether because confusion had replaced amusement. They were no longer witnessing a beginner survive. They were witnessing someone completely dictate distance and timing without appearing to try. Ryan's confidence began fading beneath irritation. "Pressure her," he snapped from the side of the mat. Derek lunged forward again with visible frustration, but Clare redirected his momentum gently enough that he lost balance and stumbled sideways before catching himself near the edge of the training area. The room gasped louder this time. Derek's face turned red immediately. Humiliation burned across his expression. "Stop playing around," Ryan barked. Clare finally looked toward the instructor directly. "I am not playing." Her tone remained calm, but now the room could feel something underneath it. Control. Years of it. Emily noticed Ryan no longer looked relaxed. His arms were still folded, but his posture had stiffened. Marcus rubbed one hand across his mouth anxiously while memories continued flooding back into his head. He remembered sports commentators calling Clare Bennett the ghost because she barely showed emotion during matches. He remembered undefeated champions becoming reckless after failing to land clean attacks against her. Most of all, he remembered how quickly confidence disappeared once opponents realized she was always 3 steps ahead. Derek suddenly rushed in again out of pure frustration, abandoning technique completely in favor of raw aggression. Clare sighed softly under her breath. Then everything changed. Her movement became sharper, cleaner, effortless in a way that instantly silenced the room. She redirected Derek's forward momentum with one controlled motion and guided him harmlessly onto the mat before stepping away immediately without celebration. The impact was not violent. What shocked everyone was the ease of it. Derek stared upward in disbelief while phones slowly lowered around the room. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody spoke. Claire backed away respectfully, giving him space to stand. "I told you we could stop," she said quietly. Derek sat up slowly, humiliated beyond words. Ryan stepped forward immediately now, his authority visibly threatened for the first time in years. "Again," he ordered coldly. Emily looked horrified. "Sensei, maybe that is enough." Ryan ignored her completely. His pride had already taken control. Claire glanced toward the younger students standing near the wall. Several looked nervous now instead of entertained. She understood exactly what kind of environment this dojo had become. Not discipline, not respect, ego disguised as leadership. Derek rose shakily to his feet, avoiding eye contact with everyone around him. Claire could have humiliated him further. She could have exposed every weakness in his technique within seconds. But she did not. That restraint unsettled Marcus more than anything else. Truly dangerous people rarely needed to prove they were dangerous. Ryan stepped onto the mat himself now, loosening the sleeves of his black GI, while the atmosphere inside the dojo shifted from curiosity into something heavier. Something uncertain. Because deep down, every instinct in the room had finally started whispering the same thing. Their instructor was no longer controlling this situation. Ryan stepped onto the mat slowly while every student in the dojo instinctively backed away to create more space. The atmosphere no longer felt like a class. It felt like the moment before a storm finally breaks. Rain hammered against the windows harder now, and somewhere near the front desk, someone quietly muted the music. Nobody wanted distractions anymore. Ryan rolled his shoulders once, eyes fixed entirely on Clare. For years he had controlled Westbrook Martial Arts Academy through intimidation, confidence, and reputation. Students admired him because they believed strength meant dominance. But standing across from Clare Bennett for the first time, Ryan felt something unfamiliar pressing into his chest. Uncertainty. Clare remained calm near the center line, her breathing steady, hands relaxed at her sides. She looked tired more than threatened. "You made your point," she said quietly. "There is no reason to continue." Ryan scoffed. "No, I think there is." He glanced briefly toward the students surrounding the mat. His pride would not allow him to back down now. Not after Derek. Not after the silence that had swallowed the room. "You walk in here acting mysterious," Ryan continued. "You embarrass one of my students in front of everyone. Now I want to see what you really are." Claire lowered her eyes briefly. "You already know." That answer unsettled him more than anger would have. Marcus stepped forward suddenly from the wall. "Ryan," he said carefully, "listen to me. Stop this." Ryan barely looked at him. "Stay out of it." "You do not understand," Marcus insisted. "I watched her fight years ago. Nobody controlled distance like she did. Nobody stayed that calm under pressure unless they were elite." Several students looked toward Claire with widened eyes. Derek remained silent near the edge of the mat, still humiliated, avoiding everyone's gaze. Ryan forced a laugh, though tension crept into his expression now. "Elite," he said mockingly. "This woman disappeared for over a decade." Marcus nodded slowly. "Exactly." The room went quiet again. Claire finally spoke, her voice softer than ever. "I disappeared because fighting stopped being healthy for me." Emily looked at her carefully. There was no pride in the statement. No attempt to sound impressive. Only exhaustion. Ryan stepped closer anyway. "Then maybe you should have stayed gone." Claire looked directly at him now. Calm blue eyes. Completely steady. "Ryan," she said quietly, "you are teaching these students the wrong lesson." His jaw tightened instantly. "Excuse me." Claire gestured subtly around the dojo. "They are afraid of humiliation more than failure. That is not discipline." Nobody moved. Nobody even whispered. Because deep down, every student knew she was telling the truth. Ryan's classes had always depended on pressure, embarrassment, and fear disguised as toughness. He stepped forward sharply now, ego finally overriding caution completely. "You think because you won some fights years ago, you can walk in here and lecture me?" Claire sighed. Softly. "No. I think pain turned you into someone angry." That sentence landed harder than anything else she had said all night. Ryan's face darkened immediately. He moved first out of pure emotion, trying to overwhelm her with speed and authority before the room lost confidence in him completely. But Claire responded with effortless timing. One step sideways. One calm redirection. One controlled movement that used Ryan's own momentum against him without unnecessary force. And suddenly the powerful instructor lost balance completely, and crashed flat onto the mat in front of his entire dojo. The sound echoed through the building. Silence followed instantly. Absolute silence. Ryan stared upward in shock, breathing hard, unable to process what had happened. Claire stepped back immediately instead of advancing. No celebration, no arrogance, no smile. She simply waited calmly while 20 students stood frozen around the room. Derek looked horrified. Emily covered her mouth with one hand. Marcus closed his eyes slowly like a man watching history repeat itself. Claire Bennett had not humiliated Ryan through aggression. She had done something far worse. She had exposed him with control. For several long seconds, nobody inside Westbrook Martial Arts Academy moved at all. Ryan remained flat on the mat, staring upward in disbelief, while the fluorescent lights reflected across his stunned expression. The silence felt almost heavy now, pressing against the walls of the dojo like invisible pressure. Students who had once admired Ryan's confidence now looked at him differently. Not weak. Human. Vulnerable. Claire stood a few feet away with her hands lowered calmly at her sides, breathing steady, showing no satisfaction in what had just happened. That was the part nobody could understand. Most people would have celebrated after humiliating a man who had mocked them publicly all night. Claire looked disappointed instead. Ryan slowly sat up, his face burning red with embarrassment as whispers quietly spread through the students gathered around the mat. Derek looked completely shaken now. The senior black belt who had spent years laughing at beginners could not even meet Claire's eyes anymore. Emily glanced around the room and realized something important. Nobody feared Ryan in that moment. They feared how wrong they had all been about Claire. Marcus stepped forward carefully, speaking almost under his breath. "I told you," he said quietly. Ryan looked toward him sharply, humiliated pride twisting across his face. "Who is she?" Marcus exhaled slowly. 12 years ago, Clare Bennett was one of the most respected fighters in the country. National Invitational Champion. Undefeated for almost 4 years. Shock spread visibly across the dojo. Several students stared at Claire as if seeing her for the first time. "That is impossible," Derek muttered. Marcus shook his head. "No. What is impossible is how long she stayed patient tonight." Claire closed her eyes briefly after hearing the old titles spoken aloud again. The room noticed immediately that she did not enjoy the recognition. Fame clearly carried painful memories for her instead of pride. Ryan finally pushed himself fully to his feet. "If you were that good," he said bitterly, "then why disappear?" The question hung heavily in the air. Rain still pounded against the windows outside, while Claire looked down at the mat quietly for several seconds before answering. "Because eventually people stop seeing you as a person," she said softly. "They only see what you can do for their ego." Nobody interrupted her. "Everywhere I went," Claire continued, "someone needed to prove something. Promoters, coaches, fighters, crowds." Her eyes slowly lifted toward Ryan. "It stops being about discipline. It becomes about pride." Ryan's expression shifted slightly, though his ego still fought against understanding her words. Claire glanced around the dojo at the younger students watching silently from the walls. "Martial arts is supposed to teach control," she said, "not humiliation." Emily felt chills hearing that sentence, because for the first time since joining the dojo, someone had finally spoken aloud what many students secretly felt. Ryan had always called public embarrassment motivation, but standing here now, exposed in front of everyone by someone who never once raised her voice, the truth became impossible to ignore. Claire walked calmly toward her folded hoodie near the bench. Nobody stopped her. Nobody mocked her anymore. Even Derek stepped aside automatically as she passed. The atmosphere inside the dojo had transformed completely. Earlier that evening, students laughed when she entered the room. Now they watched her with quiet respect bordering on disbelief. Marcus followed her slowly. "People thought you vanished forever," he said carefully. Claire picked up her duffel bag. "I wanted peace." Marcus nodded sadly. "Looks like trouble still finds you." For the first time all night, Claire gave the faintest smile. Only when people mistake kindness for weakness. The room fell silent again after that sentence. Ryan stood motionless near the center mat while years of arrogance slowly collapsed under the weight of public realization. Claire had not defeated him through force. She had defeated the entire culture he built inside that dojo. And deep down, everyone there understood it. Claire slipped her hoodie back over her shoulders slowly while the students around the dojo remained frozen in stunned silence. The rain outside had finally begun to ease, but inside Westbrook Martial Arts Academy, nobody seemed capable of returning to normal conversation. Earlier that night, laughter echoed through the room every time someone mocked the quiet woman near the door. Now even the sound of breathing felt loud. Ryan stood near the center mat with his hands hanging stiffly at his sides, still struggling to process how completely the evening had unraveled. For years, he had built his identity around being the strongest person in the room. And in less than an hour, Clare Bennett had dismantled that illusion without anger, without shouting, and without trying to humiliate anyone. That was what hurt most. Emily finally stepped forward carefully. "Miss Bennett." Clare looked toward her gently. "Yes." The younger student hesitated before speaking. "Why did you stay calm the whole time?" Several students quietly turned toward Clare, waiting for the answer. Clare adjusted the strap on her duffel bag thoughtfully. "Because losing control is easy," she said softly. "Control is the hard part." The room fell silent again. Derek looked down at the floor, ashamed now in a way he had never experienced before. All evening, he had mistaken restraint for weakness. Now he understood how dangerous that mistake could become. Marcus leaned against the wall with folded arms, still shaking his head in disbelief. "You know," he said quietly to the students nearby, "back then professional fighters used to study footage of Clare before tournaments." Several students looked stunned. "Seriously?" one teenage boy whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. "People thought they could intimidate her because she looked calm. That never ended well." Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Every arrogant comment from earlier replayed in his mind with brutal clarity now. Yoga class, beginner jokes, public humiliation. He suddenly realized Clare had given them chance after chance to stop, and they kept pushing anyway. Clare turned toward the exit calmly, clearly ready to leave the dojo behind forever. But before she could reach the door, Ryan finally spoke. "Wait." His voice sounded different now, quieter. The room immediately stilled again. Clare paused without turning around. Ryan swallowed hard, struggling against years of pride. "I was wrong," he admitted finally. The words sounded painful coming out of him. Derek stared in shock. Several students exchanged glances because none of them had ever heard Ryan apologize to anyone before. Clare slowly turned back toward him. Ryan looked around at his students before continuing. "I built this place thinking toughness meant pushing people harder than they could handle." His voice lowered further. "Maybe I forgot what respect actually looks like." Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Emily felt emotional listening because for the first time since joining the dojo, Ryan sounded honest instead of intimidating. Clare studied him quietly for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "People can change," she said softly, "but only after humility." Ryan lowered his eyes slightly, unable to argue with her. Derek stepped forward awkwardly now, embarrassment written all over his face. "I should not have treated you like that," he muttered. Clare looked at him calmly. "No," she replied. "You should not treat anyone like that." That sentence hit harder than any physical exchange earlier in the night because everyone in the dojo knew it applied far beyond Clare. Silence settled over the room again while rainwater dripped quietly from the gutters outside. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, students began lowering their phones completely. No more recording. No more entertainment. The atmosphere shifted into something almost respectful. Clare walked toward the exit once more, but this time students moved aside naturally without being told. Not out of fear, out of genuine respect. As she reached the door, Emily suddenly called after her. "Will you come back?" Clare paused with one hand on the handle. For a second the room held its breath waiting for the answer. Then Clare gave a faint tired smile over her shoulder. "Maybe," she said quietly, "if this place learns the difference between ego and discipline." And after everything that had happened that night, nobody inside the dojo could pretend they did not understand exactly what she meant. The door closed softly behind Clare Bennett as cold night air swept briefly through the dojo entrance before fading into silence again. For several seconds after she left, nobody inside Westbrook Martial Arts Academy moved at all. Rainwater still shimmered across the parking lot outside beneath the streetlights, and the distant rumble of thunder rolled through the Colorado sky like the final echo of everything that had happened that night. Ryan stood motionless near the center mat staring at the closed door. The students around him waited awkwardly, uncertain what to do now that the energy holding the dojo together for years had suddenly cracked apart. Derek finally sat down quietly against the wall, exhaustion and embarrassment written across his face. Earlier that evening, he had laughed louder than anyone else. Now he looked like someone replaying every cruel word in his mind. Emily slowly stepped onto the mat, where Ryan still stood frozen. "Sensei?" she asked carefully. Ryan looked toward her, but for once he had no immediate answer. "Ready." No lecture. No sarcastic remark. Only silence. Marcus crossed his arms near the wall and shook his head faintly. "You know what the strangest part is?" he said quietly. Several students glanced toward him. She could have humiliated every person in this room tonight if she wanted to. Nobody argued. Because deep down, they all knew it was true. Claire had controlled every moment from the instant she stepped onto the mat. Not through intimidation. Through restraint. Ryan slowly sat down on the edge of the training floor, something students had never seen him do during class hours. He looked older suddenly. Less like an untouchable instructor and more like an ordinary man forced to confront uncomfortable truths. "I spent years teaching students never to look weak," he admitted quietly. "And somehow I became the weakest person in the room." The confession stunned everyone. Derek stared at him in disbelief. Emily lowered her eyes thoughtfully. For years the dojo had operated on fear of embarrassment. Nobody wanted to be mocked. Nobody wanted to become the next joke during drills. Tonight, for the first time, they all understood how toxic that culture had become. Ryan rubbed one hand slowly across his face. "She warned us 3 different times to stop," he said almost to himself. Marcus nodded. "That is what real control looks like." Silence settled again. Then something unexpected happened. Derek stood up slowly and walked toward the younger students gathered near the wall. A teenage beginner named Noah immediately looked nervous, expecting another sarcastic comment. Instead, Derek extended his hand awkwardly. "Sorry about how I acted during training before," he muttered. Noah blinked in surprise before shaking his hand carefully. Emily smiled faintly, watching the moment unfold. Tiny changes, but real ones. Ryan looked around the dojo slowly, seeing his students differently now. Not as people to dominate. Not as extensions of his own ego. Just students trying to improve themselves. The realization hit him harder than falling onto the mat ever had. Outside, the rain finally stopped completely. Water dripped softly from the roof gutters while distant traffic hummed beyond the parking lot. Marcus walked toward the front desk and picked up one of the abandoned phones left recording earlier. He turned the screen off quietly. "Some moments are better remembered than posted online," he said. Ryan nodded slowly in agreement. For once, nobody cared about clips, views, or proving anything. The lesson that mattered had already happened. Somewhere down the street, Claire Bennett drove away from Westbrook Martial Arts Academy beneath the fading storm clouds, probably hoping once again for the quiet life she had tried so hard to build after leaving competition behind. But whether she ever returned or not, the dojo would never feel the same again. Because that night, a room full of people learned something far more important than how to fight. They learned how quickly arrogance collapses when it stands in front of genuine discipline. And long after the rain ended, the silence Claire left behind continued teaching lessons none of them would ever forget.